Welcome to Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is about language. And remember, I'm an old English teacher, so this is one of my favorite chapters because language is so important. It's so fundamental to our experience, so deeply a part of being a human being that it's hard to imagine life without language. The problem with language, though, is that one of the things is that it's symbolic. When you think of the word 5, it's just a code that represents the number of fingers we have on our hand. There's nothing particularly 5-like because of the word 5. In fact, the word 5 only has 4 letters. But still, we all say, okay, that's 5, so it all makes sense. But if you were a kid and you confused 4 and 5, you're going to have trouble for a long time with that. Language is also rule governed. The only reason that this works is because people agree on how to use these rules. There are phonological rules that govern how sounds are combined to form words. The words champagne, double, and occasions all have the same meaning in French and English, but they're pronounced completely differently. Whereas phonological rules determine how they're spoken, syntactic rules govern the way the symbols can be arranged. Although most of us aren't able to describe the syntactic rules that govern our language, it's easier to recognize their existence when they're violated. And then semantic rules also govern our language use. Syntax deals with the structure, semantic governs the meaning. So we're all set that bikes are bikes and books are books, and they kind of sound alike and they kind of look alike, but we know what they are. And if I told you it's like, okay, bring your bike or bring your book to school and you brought your bike, you'd be confused with it. There used to be a bar in Tucson, they just tore it down, called the Bum Steer, and everything was opposite of what it should have been. So the men's rooms were all labeled ladies' rooms, and the ladies' rooms were all labeled men's room. The exits were all labeled entrances. The entrances were all labeled exits. The menu started with desserts and ended with appetizers. It was a fun place until you've had a few drinks, and then it wasn't so much fun. Semantic rules also help us to understand the meaning of individual words, but they don't often explain how language operates. So if you think of the statement, let's get together tomorrow, semantically that makes sense and it's pretty easy to understand. But the statement could have a bunch of different meanings. It could be a request, like I really hope we can get together tomorrow. Or it could be like a polite command, like I want to see you tomorrow, first thing. Or it could be an empty cliche, like I don't really mean it, but that's a nice thing to say. We learn to distinguish the accurate meanings of such speech acts through pragmatic rules that tell us what use and interpretations of messages are appropriate in a given context. When pragmatic rules are understood by everybody, communication is smooth. But when you say something like, I want to see you, and somebody takes it like, oh, you want to see me? And the other person is just saying it in a hollow way, that's where problems are happening. People in individual relationships create their own set of pragmatic rules. Oftentimes you have friends who you might have a name for that's not a common name that you would use or say in front of your mother, but that's part of it. Our language is also subjective. If the rules of language were more precise and if everybody followed them, we would suffer fewer misunderstandings. And then language and worldview. For more than 150 years, theorists have put forth the notion of linguistic relativity, that language both reflects and shapes the worldview of those who use it. Bilingual speakers seem to think differently when they change languages. I told you my friend Anne Christine in Switzerland. She speaks German, French, Italian, Spanish, and English, and she speaks each of them differently, non-verbally. In fact, the Hopi Native American language, that language represents a view of reality that's different than everybody else. Their language has no nouns or verbs. People who speak it describe the entire world as being in constant process. Whereas English speakers use nouns to characterize people and objects that are fixed and constant, the Hopi language represents them more as verbs constantly changing. So our language is more like a collection of snapshots. The Hopi's language is more like a motion picture. And that's the language that they used in the movie Wind Talker, which was about coding in World War II. And the Japanese couldn't break the code because to break a code, you look for words that are nouns, and there aren't them. Language reflects and shapes reality, and we have different countries that have gendered language, where nouns are assigned a feminine, masculine, or neuter gender, like in Spanish, Belgian. There are genderless language, where the nouns have no gender, like in Cambodia, in South Africa. And then there's natural language, where most nouns have no grammatical markings of gender, like in the United States and in Swedish. Findings show that countries using gendered language have less gender equality, especially in terms of women's economic participation. In addition, women have greater access to political empowerment in countries that speak natural gender language. So in Europe, especially in the Czech and Russian languages, a boy's last name is different than his sister. Emin Agalarov, my friend, his sister is Maria Agalarova, because they put an A at the end of their last name. Martina Navratilova, the famous tennis player, her brother's last name is Navratilov. So how does language impact us? Our name is part of language. And what's a name, Juliet asked Romeo? Well, it's a great deal. They shape the way others think about us, the way we view ourselves, and the way that we act. So I hate my name. Donald, right? Donald Duck. McDonald's. Donald Trump. Not a great area to call from, right? So my mother says she named me that because my brothers were John, Don, and Tom. And she wanted nice, easy names with a last name like Slessor, which kind of makes sense, I guess. It didn't work with my dad, though, when he grew up. So my dad's older brother's name is James, Jim, Jimmy, but everybody called him Bud. My dad's name was John, Johnny, but they called him Pat or Jack. His younger brother David, Davy, everybody calls Gus. But Aunt Doris was always just Aunt Doris. I'm not sure why her name didn't have. So my mother thought that my dad had like 6 or 7 brothers, but really, actually, there was just the 3 of them. So names have always been a fun little thing, especially teaching when you come across names. You know, one of the names make me crazy a little bit. The name Nevaeh, which is heaven backwards, is really popular right now. But there's no Leah, which is hell backwards, but I guess there's a reason for that, right? So we had students in 7th grade. I had the 3 girls, and they were Mercedes, Porsche, and Lexus. Dad obviously named the kids, right? Another name that I saw was pronounced Espen, ESPN, and I really think that Dad did that one too. So some of the names that I find that I think are fun. This name. This is Absidy. A-B-C-D-E, Absidy, right? I know, it drives me crazy. So this name caused a lot of trouble for our school district. This name is Ladasha. And the student system, computer system that we had at the time would not accept a dash in the first name. So we told the mom that we can either spell it out, L-A-D-A-S-H-A, or just put L-A space A, but we couldn't put a dash in the computer. And her mom's like, her name is not Ladasha, it's Ladasha. And so it went around and around, and finally I think that's the reason why the school district ended up having to get a whole new system, was because of something like this. There are students whose last names are from Male and Name, which in normal talk is female, male, and no name. I know, it's really sad. And then these I just saw. I'm not really sure if they're real names or not. Forrest and Noel. Hopefully nobody's really using those names, right? But early studies claim that people with non-nominative names suffered everything from psychological, non-normal names, everything from psychological to emotional disturbances and to failure in college. Later studies show that people often have negative appraisals, not only in unusual names, but also in unusual name spellings. Some people regard unique names as distinctive rather than unusual. You know, a lot of our celebrities, sports figures and stuff have been naming their children a lot of odd names. Language also is a way of building and demonstrating solidarity with others. When couples use similar language styles while instant messages, the chances of their relationship continuing increase by almost 50%. Close friends and lovers also develop a set of special terms that serve as a way of signifying their relationship. This is called convergence. You know, you want this identity together. So when I was in Barcelona, I loved Barcelona. I loved the language, but they speak Spanish differently. So I started saying gracias in Barcelona. And my friends with me, they're just like, you need to drop that and drop that right now. And I'm like, no, it's neat, gracias. And they're like, you can't say that when you're back in America. That's not a thing you can say. And then with convergence, also, I always say mom and dad. My brothers, they always say dad and mom. Because I'm closer, I think, to my mom than my dad. What do you say? And even with friends, I always talk about Barbara and Benjamin because I've known Barbara longer. But I talk about Tom and Katie because Tom and I were friends before Katie came along. One of the things I love about a group of my students, the Flores boys, Miguel, Javier, and Pancho, Francisco, they would be over at the house and it'd be getting later and Javier would be like, oh, my mom says we were supposed to be home before dark. And Miguel's like, no, my mom didn't say anything about it. She said, just give her a call. And Pancho's like, no, my mom, kind of thing. And they all talked about their mom like it was a separate woman. They used possessive pronoun as their mom, kind of thing like that, which we don't do in my culture, but I think it's a great thing. When two or more people feel equally positive about one another, their linguistic convergence is going to be mutual. But this also, it works in the reverse too. Communicators who want to set themselves apart from others adapt a strategy of convergence. Divergence, which is speaking in a way that emphasizes their differences. Okay, so that's going to be part 1. Join me in just a little bit for part 2.